let's go straight to my next guest. Natasha Hausdorff is a barrister. She's also legal director at UK Lawyers for Israel. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia. Great to be with you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully you'll find this a nicer place to be received than when you sort of go to places like the UN and others, indeed many universities, where we just see the most outrageous slurs that you have to try and counter. And you've done a fantastic job over the last 2 years to try and counter some of the malice and the slurs. I just want to ask, first of all, your reaction to the question today we're asking our audience about police getting powers, we're told by the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood, to ban repeat protests after these, they call them pro-Palestinian rallies. They're anti-Israel and anti-Jewish rallies, and they're pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas, aren't they? But they went ahead despite that Manchester synagogue terror attack, despite the pleas from the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister and the police, and they still went ahead. What do you think of those powers? Do you think those are justified?
Well, Julia, I've always been quite convinced by the well-made arguments that the police and the Home Secretary, in fact, have already existing powers that they should be making use of under the Public Order Act, under the Terrorism Act. And what we have seen over the last 2 years is a failure to properly grapple with the problem that we've been facing, and to make better use of those existing powers. And no more was this, I think, on display than a couple of days ago. I heard a very senior former police officer quibbling with politicians who were calling these repeated marches hate marches, and in fact suggesting that it was the politicians themselves that were at fault for using that term. And therein we have, I think, the real problem, which is not the existence of legislation, but the willingness to call out what we have been seeing on the streets, calls for Intifada, calls for death.
What does Intifada mean? Because we've been told, I mean, we've even been told that the word jihad, the name of this terrorist last Thursday, Jihad al-Shami, we're told that, you know, it's struggle. It's nothing provocative.
Well, we just need to look at Arab media across the Middle East and what these terms are understood to be in that context. And it's high time, I think, that we take the people who are threatening not just Israel in this respect, but the West and our values and our way of life. We take them at their word. When they are calling for Intifada, this is a reference to the waves of terrorism attacks, suicide bombings against innocent Israeli civilians. And when they are seeking to globalize that is exactly, of course, what we saw in Manchester last week. That is exactly what these calls indeed...
Let's call it what it is. Globalised Intifada means kill Jews anywhere. That's what it means.
And I would actually suggest that those chanting it have a desire to widen that. So it's not just Jews anymore, but all of those that do not subscribe to their particular worldview.
Well, I'm apparently a supporter of what's called the Zionist entity. I was saying the phrase Zionist entity is always one of the giveaways on social media, and proud to be so. I mean, I think they think it's an insult. I'm really not sure why they think it's an insult. Have you felt intimidated? We've seen so many people speaking so powerfully in the last few days, and frankly for the last 2 years, about how intimidated they feel by this. And when we have people marching on the streets every fortnight, we had people, let's be honest, celebrating. They were out celebrating, even on Thursday night and on Friday and on Saturday, again and again. Whitehall, in Manchester itself. The festival feel of some of these apparently very concerned protests about babies dying in Palestine, where they think still it actually exists. There was a festival feel. They were celebrating Jews being murdered, weren't they?
And I can entirely understand why the Jewish community in the UK and elsewhere around the world feels intimidated in this context. But I think it's extremely important, and thank you for your kind words in the introduction. I go, Julia, where I'm needed, and wherever the truth really needs to be told, be it at the United Nations or on university campuses or on media, when it will have me. And I think it's utterly critical that more people feel confident enough, armed with the facts, and armed with a proper understanding of the law, which is of course central to so many misrepresentations that we also hear parroted on these hate marches. So many more people need to feel empowered to speak up and not to be intimidated by this falsification of fact, but also the false sense of indignation and even sympathy that we have seen. Because if these people truly cared about Palestinian civilians, they would be holding those accountable, who are truly responsible for this continued suffering, Hamas. And they would also acknowledge that by their very actions, coming out week after week to provide support and succor to internationally prescribed terrorist organizations, that they are dragging out this conflict and they are increasing the suffering of Palestinians thereby.
And this is reality. I've never seen any of these marches ever, or any of the people making this case on social media. My God, they spend, I don't know whether any of these people have actually got jobs. They spend so much time on social media. And they seem to always manage to make their case without at any point suggesting that Hamas should release the hostages, should lay down their own weapons, stop using Palestinian people, particularly innocent babies and children, as human shields. Also, crucially, I haven't heard a single call for Hamas to sign up to this Trump peace plan. Now, we know in Egypt right now, in Sharm el-Sheikh, there must be good, I've been there many times, but I don't know, there must be good golf courses there because Steve Witkoff, the president's envoy, has been sent there, his golf buddy, and envoy for everything. But we've got in different rooms, they're not being the same as Hamas leadership and Egyptian, apologies, and Israeli leadership, and they're discussing this 20-point plan. Now, we know it was first announced by Donald Trump last week with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, and he had accepted this 20-point plan. Hamas, at the end of last week, put out a statement saying they did accept the plan. All the reports, CNN saying yes, they accept, but it's a yes, but the but is so big, they haven't accepted the plan, have they? Tell us what they've agreed to, what they haven't agreed to, as far as we know.
The major sticking point in terms of what's been publicised is ultimately their continued control of the Gaza Strip and the demilitarisation of Gaza, the dismantling of Hamas itself. It seems in principle that they have subscribed to the release of all hostages, although it's important to note that Trump's deadline was in fact for the acceptance of this deal by 6 p.m. US time yesterday. And Hamas clearly haven't done that, despite being threatened with obliteration by Trump if they didn't sign on to accept and agree to those terms. So unfortunately, we are seeing, as we have over the last 2 years, the goalpost shifting, the deadlines being moved back. But perhaps we can be, cautiously optimistic that this current set of circumstances has come about. Again, there's a pattern here which we would do well to learn from, through the Israeli military applying unrelenting pressure to the remaining Hamas terrorists, this time in Gaza City, despite the rhetoric of the international community seeking to encourage Hamas. And we've seen time and time again where support for Hamas and the recognition of a Palestinian state and rewards to Hamas for their bloody activities on the 7th of October, the atrocities, the genocide that they committed. That has encouraged Hamas to renew its intransigence, to back away from negotiations in the past. And on the flip side of that, we have the military pressure that Israel has been applying, which seems to have, again, brought them to the negotiating table. But it's important to stress that they are now seeking to negotiate and to push back and to delay the release of these hostages. 48 remaining hostages for 2 years tomorrow.
20 still believed to be alive. But of course, again, apparently it's been claimed they don't actually have access to, they've been taken by various other jihadist groups. Find them. But of course, by the way, these people will be released in return, innocent people taken captive 2 years ago from homes and elsewhere. And they're going to be released in return for hundreds of prisoners, some of whom are mass murdering terrorists themselves, who for some reason Hamas want back. Do you think this time we are going to get to deal? We know there's a lot of pressure on Netanyahu. We know that Donald Trump is desperate to be the peacemaker at any cost. He said he would back Netanyahu, and it's like, okay, if Hamas don't come to the table, you should say they didn't sign up full stop onto this deal by that time yesterday, and all those deadlines kept being moved, didn't it? That actually, all hell would break loose, and Israel would have free reign. But at the end of the day, we've once again got a situation where Hamas are given credit for pretending to agree to a deal, and Israel is being attacked for continuing to attack in Gaza City. And as always, whatever the outcome, Israel will be blamed and Hamas somehow get away scot-free. That is what keeps happening. And it keeps happening not just with the idiots who get their news from TikTok and on the pro-Palestinian marches, but it's happening on Sky and ITV and, crucially, on the BBC. They accept this. They push this stuff. They push this line in their reporting with experienced, long in the tooth war reporters pushing this line.
So a couple of things on that. I think the pressure that Trump is applying on Hamas this week is clearly in light of what is happening on Friday, which is the Nobel Prize
Yeah.
Committee will be awarding the Peace Prize on the 10th of October, I think at 11 a.m. Central European time. And so this week is crunch time to have something set down on paper for the President of the United States. But you're absolutely right in terms of the role that the media has been playing here. And I include the media. I should have earlier when I spoke about politicians around the world encouraging Hamas intransigence and rewarding their terror activities. Yeah. The fact that the media have served, not just over the past 2 years, many years prior to that, but the last 2 years it's really reached fever pitch, as a mouthpiece for Hamas propaganda, to the extent that journalists are pretty open about the fact that they won't report the truth for fear of not being able to continue their operations in the Middle East, that they therefore subscribe to the censorship that internationally prescribed terrorist organizations like Hamas, like Hezbollah in Lebanon, put on them, the constraints that they put on them, and that they only report within those tramlines. You know, so much for journalistic integrity, but you're absolutely right that that is a key factor, not just in the continuation of this war, which, let's face it, should have ended years ago, but also in the climate that we are experiencing in this country. The spike in anti-Semitism is undeniably fueled by the information war that the media have so gladly participated in. And that is something that there has to be accountability for.
Oh, absolutely. Well, apparently I'm going to be taken to The Hague for war crimes. I'm happy to be tried, but there we are. Natasha Hausdorff, a barrister, legal director at UK Lawyers for Israel. Thank you very much.